Welcome to the Mystery of Life. I'm Jo.
And I'm Jonny.
And today we're asking, what was the Cache Landrum incident? We're talking UFOs. I mean, this one's a bit weird. I mean, they're all a bit weird, I suppose. But it's just like, it's more than a UFO. Have you heard of this one? You're a bit UFO friendly.
Not sure I like that statement.
You enjoy looking for UFOs? Well, watching programs about people looking for UFOs. It's not like you really go out and look for them.
I look up sometimes.
Okay, well, our story begins with Betty Cache and Vickie Landrum, and they were friends, and it's the 29th of December, 1980. Betty and Vickie are driving home after dinner. It's about 9 p.m. They have Vickie's grandson, Colby, in the back. He's 7. Now, this gets reported as being on State Road 1485 near Dayton, which is Texas, just outside Houston. But actually, it happened on Road 1485 between New Caney and Huffman when they're on their way back to Dayton. I'm not sure it matters, but some people bring it up as if Betty and Vickie can't remember where this happened. That's not true at all. It just sometimes gets misreported. So I felt like we should point that out.
Lying cows.
No. They have always been very clear about where it was. So they see a really bright light, like really bright. And apparently they could see it through the thick trees, and they drove for about a mile like this. And you know, like when it's really sunny and you can sort of see it's like tree, sun. They describe it as being like through the trees like that. But then something was lighting up the whole sky, and they knew then it was not a plane.
The whole sky?
Yeah. I guess like what they could see anyway, because, you can never really see the whole sky, can you? Or
Even
can
the
you?
sky they could see would be a feat.
Well, if it's dark and you're seeing something that bright, you're not going to be able to see that much more than what's in front of you.
So it was just a big light.
Yeah, bright light. Very bright.
Don't like these girls already.
Why?
Gotta be specific. It wasn't the whole sky. It was just something near you that was bright.
I don't see a problem with that, because if I looked out of the window right now, I could say the whole sky because of the limited amount of sky that I could see. So in their world, it was the whole sky.
All right.
I don't take issue with that. You know how I feel about aliens. For those of you that don't know, I'm kind of like in two minds about aliens. So, I'm not exactly going to go in really, really believing Vickie and Betty here. They then started feeling this really intense heat, and the light was so bright they now couldn't really see properly. So Vickie is screaming at Betty to stop the car, and as she does so, Betty sort of slams on the brakes, and Vickie puts her arms out, like to brace herself. When you're stopping really fast, you put your arms out in front of you, and her palm, like the handprints of her palms, embed in the car dashboard, like they're imprinted on the car dashboard. And they think that it was because of the heat, like it had softened because of the heat that they were feeling that was suddenly all around them. And they claimed that they could still see it weeks later.
Claimed?
Well, yeah, because we didn't see it. This was 1980.
So there's no photos of this?
There's no photo of that, no. Which is a disappointment, I'll be honest. Because even though in 1980 you may not have had a camera in your car, I get that. If it was like even a few days, wouldn't you take a picture of it?
I sure would if it was part of an alien encounter.
Well, what happens next might be the reason why. Maybe they got a bit distracted. So they now see this very large diamond-shaped craft in the sky. And Betty, she's like, right, I need to get out and see what this is. So she gets out of the car. Like, why are you getting out of the car? Like, you can see it from the car. You're scared. Apparently it's so hot now that you're like, your car is melting. Why are you getting out of the car? Would you get out of the car?
Maybe.
But really though, you're a bit scared. Like, you don't know what this is. Even if you don't think aliens, something weird is going on.
Well,
would you get out of the car?
My thought would be maybe they're going to blow the car up.
Okay, but you'd get out and run then?
Oh, I wouldn't get out and be like, what's up?
Yeah, like she got out and like stood next to the car like, what's this?
Maybe the lights in the glass, because like...
Maybe. Well, Vickie and the kids stayed in the car. And they said it was diamond-shaped, but rounded around the middle and sort of pointier at the top and the bottom, if you're getting like an idea of what this looks like, with a small ring of blue lights around the middle.
Right. Sounds like a wooden top.
Yeah. But it wasn't wooden. It appeared metal, but, we don't know. The heat was now very, very intense, and she said she felt like she was burning from the inside out. Apparently, flames came out of the bottom. It would sort of dip down a bit, and as it got closer to the ground, flames would come out, and it would, go back up.
Right.
Well, Betty said that she was too afraid to move, and then Vickie started shouting, we have to leave, we have to go. So Betty tries to get back into the car, and she notes that the door handle is now so hot she couldn't bear to touch it. She was burning. So she had to use her jacket and sort of open the car and get in. And at this point, it sort of looks as if maybe it's starting to move away. Betty says apparently at this point they were just wondering if they would make it out alive. And as they're sitting in their car, I guess preparing to leave the area, all these helicopters descend on the area and surround the craft. Vickie says that she counted 23 and that these were big helicopters. She didn't know what type of helicopters these were.
They were the large helicopters that has the double rotaries on them. I counted 22, and Kobe said, there's another one, and I said, that makes 23. And they were the kind of helicopters that you just don't see, because I didn't know what kind they were. And they, I knew had to belong to the Army.
Okay, so there's Vickie telling you herself that she doesn't know what type of helicopters these are, but that they must belong to the Army. Later, apparently, they sort of looked at helicopters and things, and other people had seen the helicopters, and they were identified as the Chinook type helicopters that the military or the government would use. But obviously, she didn't know that at the time. So, I don't know, make of that what you will, but big helicopters. And there's 23, which is a lot anyway, even if just a regular helicopter. Now, that's not the end of the story, but it is the end of this particular incident. Now, what are your thoughts on this before we move on? And have you heard this before?
I haven't, no. Or I might have, but not to my recollection.
Okay, the next bit might trigger your memory. Because at the moment, it's just someone seeing a craft. Right, okay, I thought you'd say that, but why?
The fire thing.
But why? Okay, so why is that bullshit?
Because no alien craft is going to use anything combustible as its fuel source.
Why?
Because it's the main reason we haven't travelled space. Because do you know how much fuel it uses just to get out of our... Yeah,
but who's to say they haven't found a new fuel?
You'd need something that is renewable.
Who's to say it's not renewable? You don't know what they're using, so anything could create flames. I'm just surprised that that's the part of this that you've chosen to, not believe.
Well, I'm not sure what they achieved out of this. That's also bullshit. Just bothered some ladies and fucked off.
Well, but I guess the ladies weren't the key reason for visiting, because they didn't seem to... It wasn't as if they were coming after the ladies. The ladies, Betty and Vickie, more came across them. And obviously these 23 helicopters surrounded it and it flew off.
They were over-specific on details, which I didn't like.
Do you think?
Yeah, it's a sign of a made-up story if you're able to be like, I counted 22, and then Jane said, oh, look, there's one more. And I said, oh, yeah, that makes 23.
But I think that's more likely that you'll remember it if somebody else comments on it.
No, I think that you'll remember it if you've made it up.
I remember things. It doesn't make... I always make stuff up.
No, but in this instance, in a stressful situation, you're seeing a fucking alien and you can remember exactly how many helicopters it was.
I don't know. Again, that doesn't make me doubt them. So, okay, right. So Betty, they go home, this helicopter issue group squadron? Do you have a squadron of helicopters? I don't know. They've surrounded the craft and the craft has flown off with the helicopters, a bit like it's being escorted. Now, Betty drops Vickie and Colby home and then drives home herself. And in the night, Colby wakes up Vickie crying. He's burning up. He's got a fever. He's very unwell. A little while later, Vickie also gets sick. And by morning, they're both quite unwell and suffering from what Vickie describes it as a very bad case of sunburn. So, you're being sick, you're burning up, you feel hot to touch, that type of thing.
Radiation poisoning, then.
Well, I'm surprised that you jumped straight to that.
Well, it's got the exact same symptoms. And happens a lot after these events.
So, well, that's not what occurs to Vickie at first. Vickie doesn't immediately jump to that. She just thinks they've been unwell. But she does get quite worried because she can't reach Betty. So she goes around to Betty's house. And when she gets there, she finds Betty in a terrible state. She's got a fever, all the symptoms that Vickie and Colby had, but she also has red welts, which is a bit like hives, all over her face and hands. And she has a terrible headache, and she's just like generally really unwell. And after 4 days, Vickie and Colby were still a bit under the weather, but like mostly getting on with, things. And Betty was like falling apart. She was really not doing well. So Vickie made her go to see a doctor. They admitted her to hospital. And 3 weeks later, she underwent treatment for acute radiation poisoning. Now, you say this happens a lot. Do they all actually get treatment for it? Or do people just say they've been unwell?
A combination of both. There's been cases where people have got like obvious like radiation burns, but others where it's very minor and they haven't gone to the doctors.
So what do you think about that? The fact that the doctor's treating her?
Well, you can't deny symptoms. In that case, I think it's more likely to be that they were witness to some sort of military test that got a little bit out of hand.
Okay, well, she was hospitalised for 6 weeks. She lost more than half of her hair and patches of her skin on her face. Betty's doctor, Brian McClelland, treated her for 6 years, and in 1991, in a documentary, he stated on record that they, as a group of doctors, were convinced that she had been exposed to high doses of radiation, but he was unable to say what the source was. Now, even after she was released from hospital, she had side effects basically forever. She would sort of have random swelling. She'd lose her appetite. I mean, she really wasn't in a good way. And Vickie and Colby were unwell, but they were kind of managed outside of a hospital. They weren't hospitalised. Now, at this point, I did start to wonder what their general health was like anyway. And I don't know if it matters because, radiation is going to affect you no matter what age you are. I don't really think that changes, does it?
Not really, no. It's shit for everyone.
But Vickie was 57 and Betty was 51, and of course Colby was 7. But it's difficult because I feel like when you're that age, obviously you are more susceptible to just getting ill in general. But obviously, what else could cause this? It has to have been that, right?
From what I understand of radiation, once you're away from it and haven't died, you'll get better. If you survive to a certain point, you're going to survive, and you'll eventually just get all of the radiation out your system.
Well, she didn't get better. And a few weeks later, so she gets out of hospital, and Vickie, by now, is calling around government agencies and officials, and she eventually calls NASA, as if this is a completely normal thing to do. To be honest with you, if I saw a UFO, I don't know who I'd start with by calling. You, probably.
I'm always intrigued by how these people get the phone number of NASA.
There must be a phone number for NASA. I'm not saying but you're going to get some sort of reception. You're not going to get head scientist. You're going to get,
hello, NASA here.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? You're going to get hello, how can I help you? Oh, I'd like to speak to someone about an alien invasion or an alien. Yeah, they're just going to press a button and put you through some sort of answer phone somewhere. So I don't doubt that she could ring them, but NASA actually put her in touch with a UFO investigator, John Schuessler. Don't know if you've heard of him. He seems to crop up in a number of places. But he says he hadn't heard of anything like this before, especially not in this area of Texas. Now, again, this is where I wonder, did NASA just have a person where, oh, okay, you want to report a UFO? Yeah, go and speak to John.
Yeah, I would question any government-appointed UFO investigator.
Well, he didn't work for NASA. I think he had worked for NASA. I couldn't really establish exactly where his connection first began there. He was definitely obviously in contact with them, but he was at this point an independent UFO investigator.
Yeah, I'd still be wary of them pointing me towards him, though. He might be paid to keep these things quiet. He might get your own investigator.
But then who do you get? That's what I mean. I don't know that I'd know who to ring.
MUFON.
Who?
MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network.
Oh, right. Did that exist in 1980?
I don't know.
Okay, so he comes out and he interviews Betty and Vickie, and he actually takes them back to the site of the incident, and they were able to be very specific about where it was and where they were. And they actually find a spot on the road that indicated it had been burned and exposed to a very high heat. Now, shortly afterwards, they're visiting the area again. I don't know why, but the asphalt was replaced. They turn up, and apparently they then asked around, and witnesses said that the material from the road, they took off I don't know how asphalt is done, but they took off the first layer or whatever. They took off the material, put that in their truck, covered that up, and then put new road down. And it was all done apparently with military precision. It wasn't your average we'll be back in 3 weeks, here's some traffic lights. It was done very quickly and very professionally. And they reworked the asphalt. And some people say that they do this often, But I would say that like roads are re-tarmacked every few years. So I don't think it's necessarily because of this area. But some people think like the stain might be coming back through of where it was burned.
I can't imagine they'd replace a stain.
Well, it wasn't it was a stain, but I mean like it was a burn. So I guess did they either want to, was it that it wasn't very aesthetically pleasing? Was it that the heat had damaged the road? Or was it that the government didn't want anyone to know that anything had happened there and they took it away?
Well, you're assuming that...
all three.
What I don't like here is there was probably some guys out there that were like, right, you know what? We get a shit rep out. Let's fucking smash it out, guys.
Well, you mean the guys who were replacing the asphalt?
Yeah, they've been like, right, let's do the best job of our life. In, out, military precision. And now everyone's like, no, can't have been them. They're like, oh, fuck's sake.
So you don't think the government had anything to do with replacing that area on the road?
I think it was a damaged bit of road that needed replacing, kind of a burnt bit of road.
Okay, so they interviewed witnesses, and within a 5-mile radius, they basically canvassed the whole area. They must have had help, but, you know.
Yeah, have you heard one large military helicopter go over our house?
Not here, but like at work, there's one that goes over every now and again. Yeah, it is actually the exact, like it is a Chinook. And which is, if you don't know, it's basically like a stretched helicopter, I think is how I would.
With 2 rotors.
Yeah, and they're very, very, very loud.
Now imagine 23 of those.
Yeah.
There should be 1 million witnesses.
There's not 1 million, but there is a lot. And they're able to find at least 10 who go on record and say that they've seen the helicopters, and a few that say that they actually think they saw the craft, but they were like in their homes behind the trees, not necessarily in the road where Vickie and Betty were. They do find a Dayton police officer who was in his car with his wife, driving a little bit behind or adjacent to Vickie and Betty, and he confirms that he did see the helicopters moving through the trees. He actually thought there was an aircraft down because there was like a kind of clearing, and the military crafts all had their like lights pointing down to the ground, their kind of spotlight beam things. And he said they didn't hesitate, they didn't stop, they just kept going and flew in the direction in which is where Betty and Vickie would have been. So he saw the helicopters, but he didn't see the craft.
I think obviously something happened. I don't think these 2 ladies were up burning roads and.
No. I have to say, no one theorises that it was them that burnt a hole in the road.
Good,
So.
okay. Yeah, and did they get any bothered by any Men in Black or anything throughout?
Well, actually, they bothered the Men in Black. So
that's a new twist.
Yeah, they became convinced.
Tell me they rang them.
Well, I mean, I don't know how this came about.
Hello, I've just been on the line to NASA and I got your telephone number.
No, they actually wrote letters to their senators explaining what had happened, and the Air Force actually agreed to a meeting. Now, that alone I find interesting. Because if there was nothing here, wouldn't you just be like, okay, go away? Like, we haven't even got time to see you today.
I think you underestimate the persistence of a 50-year-old woman.
I feel like if I rang NASA or wrote to our local, well, we don't have senators, but like member of parliament, and I was like, right, I need to see someone from the Air Force or from the government or like someone who can talk to me about this UFO incident I had, and like I was persistent, I feel like they'd still be like, we don't have time for this. Like, the country's in crisis. Although, I don't know, it probably wasn't in crisis in 1980. That seemed like quite a good year. But, like...
I think they have more recently said that they will not be answering any questions regarding UFOs. Stop asking us.
Okay, well, so Betty and Vickie go to a meeting at Bergstrom Air Base, and Vickie says...
The access these 2 women have got, just them, I just see them there with their little coats and their holding their bags.
That's exactly what they look like. They are the cutest old ladies, because like by the time they were interviewed and there's like documentaries and stuff, they were like, in their 60s, 70s, 80s, like they're just adorable little old women by this point.
How they've got onto an Air Force base. I'm telling you, there's so many letters behind this. There's so many.
Well, from the sounds of it, there's really only one. Like, they just agreed to see them. I think, actually, the fact that they were 2 adorable, like, they were 50 when this happened, but, like, now they're old and adorable. Well, I'll be honest with you, they're dead now. But, sorry, spoiler alert. But they did live, like, for quite a while after this. But I think even then, they were these, like, 2, like, cute little old ladies. Maybe the government just thought, well, they're not the type of people that would normally come in here and report a UFO. So maybe it was curiosity. Maybe that got them through the door. Because if it was like me and you, and we're like, hi, we have a podcast and we want to talk to you about UFOs, they'd be like, oh. Because they must get that every day.
Maybe. Still think they probably complained their way through to a lot of this.
Oh, anyway, they got in. And Vickie says that when they walked in, she remembers a big map of the area on the wall, and where the incident took place was very clearly marked. She says that they were questioned for 2 hours and that the interview was recorded by a military stenographer, which, I mean, I think you would kind of expect. I feel like if I was going to an airbase for a meeting about something that may or may not have happened, I would expect to be recorded.
Sounds like these women have been tricked into thinking that an interrogation is a meeting.
So,
we were in separate rooms.
the two men that interviewed them said that there was no military or government operations conducted at the time of the incident that they saw. But despite this, they said that Vickie and Betty could file a claim and that it would be looked into and investigated. So they went off to their lawyers and they filed a claim. And 4 weeks later, their claim for medical damages was denied, which, I mean, I can't say I'm surprised. Because it's like, if they did do it, they obviously don't want to admit it. And if they didn't do it, they're like, okay, we've listened to you, now just go away.
Yeah, I didn't think this was gonna end well. I didn't think the ladies were gonna get a massive payout, and the government. Yeah, that was us. Sorry.
Well, some people were saying like, oh, they just obviously just made all this up to try and like get a big payday. But also, obviously, if you don't live in America, just take a second to remember how ridiculous medical expenses are in America. Like in England, we go and have a night in hospital and we're like, oh, see ya the next day. Like they're like, okay, now I'm 20 grand in debt at best. Like can't afford to eat for the next 6 months. Like
you're not going to fake radiation poisoning because that genuinely sucks.
No, I mean, she's up to her eyeballs in hospital bills at this point because of how like she's had like weeks and weeks in hospital and ongoing care. And they don't think she's faking it. Not at all. Not the doctors, that is.
That was blatantly some secret military shit.
Well, in 1982, they filed a lawsuit against the US government. But unfortunately, it was dismissed because of lack of evidence, which, again, I sort of get. It really is like their word against the government's. So,
yeah.
If the government aren't willing to admit this, you weren't going to get very far. And you have no other evidence, which I think is probably what they were trying to find out when they took Betty and Vickie to the airbase. Like, what do you actually know?
Oh, yeah. Like, they never think the government's your friend. Like, let's have a little chat. That was an interrogation. Whether they, like, man, got slapped about, but they got interrogated.
Well, Betty, unfortunately, was diagnosed with various types of cancer. She was hospitalised at least once every year. And after the incident, up until the day she died, she never really got better. Vickie and Colby continued to fight various illnesses. Vickie had serious visual problems. All three of them had an unusually low white blood cell count and struggled with even the most minor of illness. Betty, though, she says that she could forgive the government if they were protecting the country. She just wants to understand what they were exposed to, which is like kind of nice.
It is, but I don't believe her.
Why? Why is she lying about that? She just wants them to admit it.
Yeah, and then she goes, aha!
That'll be several million, please.
I fucking knew it, you arsehole.
The Department of the Army Inspector General do investigate, but they deny all knowledge of government involvement, and they say that Betty and Vickie seem credible, as do the police officer and his wife who saw the helicopters, and that no witness seems to be doing this for any type of, like, unfair or... They're not lying, they're not going out of their way. Like, they do believe that they think they saw something, but the government had nothing to do with it.
Well, yeah.
So Betty dies in 1998, and she was aged 69. Vickie dies in 2007, aged 83. Colby, I believe, is still alive. He actually appeared on UFO Hunters in 2009. And you might be interested to know that Vickie initially thought that when she asked Betty to stop the car that night, she thought it was the second coming of Jesus. And I tried to find out what she felt it really was by the end of it, if that made sense. Because, like, obviously it didn't go well for them.
What a shitty second coming of Jesus.
Yeah.
He was there for a very short while. He got chased by helicopters and then he killed us all.
Okay, so what do we actually think happened here? So John Schuessler, the independent UFO researcher of sorts, he wrote a book on the subject, on the incident. And he thinks that it was either an experiment by the government, some sort of experimental craft, or it really was a UFO, possibly extraterrestrial. Vickie, on the other hand, said that she doesn't believe in little green men. She thinks the government might have been carrying a spacecraft, but it was definitely the government. Now, there's a lot to unpack there because even if the government were involved,
where'd they get the spacecraft from? If
but like, how can she say that she thinks it's a spaceship and that the government were escorting a spaceship, but she doesn't believe in little green men? Like, surely you have to consider the fact that there were aliens on that ship if you really believe it was a spacecraft.
No, I think she uneloquently meant a ship that we've made to go into space, not something we've captured.
Even so, I don't know how she can not believe in aliens at this point.
It's weird. It's weird, but it does kind of make it more credible.
Now, while some people are wholeheartedly believing exactly everything what happened here, because honestly, they really are two lovely little old ladies. Like, it's hard to not take them seriously. And they're sitting exactly how you imagine. Like, they got their little bags and like, it's hard to see anything other than good in these people. You know, like they didn't want like millions and millions. They just wanted their medical bills paid and they wanted to understand what was going on. Like, other than that, they haven't exactly made a lot of money out of this, apart from the guy that wrote the book. But there are a fair few number of skeptics that have reported on this. And I don't know, I'm struggling with this. Like, so the photo comes up a lot, or the lack of photo, what you mentioned at the beginning. Why is there no photo of the handprint in the dashboard? Because that gets cited as evidence quite a lot, but really...
Not evidence.
Well, there's no evidence of it, is there?
Something they said happened. It'd be cool if it did, but get a photo of it.
Yeah. I think it might have happened, but it went away quickly. Do you know what I mean? I think like in their panic, they thought it might have been imprinted. But you know, like on some cars, I don't know what car she had, but you know, on some cars, you can sort of, when it's warm, you can put your hand on the dashboard and it leaves like a handprint.
Well, yeah, you got some that have got a slightly soft layer on top, so you can kind of push into them.
So I wonder if it sort of was there for a little while, but the next day it had gone. Like maybe the fact that people saying that it was there for weeks, maybe that's what's wrong there. So I don't know. I have a hard time with that. My next issue with this is if the door handle was so hot and the dashboard was melting, would the car not have just broken down?
No.
The tyres burst? Because do you remember this summer when it was like 40 degrees and the news were like, oh, be careful. Like if you've got bald tyres, your car's going to blow up. And like people's cars did stop working, to be fair. And that was like 40 degrees. And if it's this hot.
Can do.
I don't know. I just felt like if it's that hot, the car wouldn't have fared so well.
The outside might be that hot, but the engine is more difficult to heat up.
Well, according to John's book on the incident, from the minute of the first sighting of the lights to the departure of the craft, the whole thing was about 20 minutes. Now, this doesn't sound like a very long time, but if you're burning and you feel like you're burning from the inside out...
That is a very long time.
It is, isn't it?
A minute's a long time if you're burning.
Yeah.
That is a long time.
So they did check the car with a Geiger meter, which I thought was at least a prudent thing to do. And they found no sign of radiation, no residual radiation. Now, some point out that this type of direct radiation wouldn't actually have left behind residual radioactivity in or on the car. So what do we think here?
I think giving them the benefit of the doubt, best case scenario, or, well, not for them, but they saw some sort of...
Oh, hang on, let's not forget, they both lived to like 70 and 83.
Yeah, but like
so it wasn't
really
as if,
ill
like,
lives.
Yeah.
Best case scenario, they saw a government experiment, something new, something powered by something I can't even comprehend, and exposure to it has given them radiation poisoning, and it's worse in that stupid cow that got out of the car because she got out of the car.
I mean, that does make sense, doesn't it? Multiple doctors and experts, however, have commented that for the radiation symptoms, the extreme radiation symptoms that Betty experienced, given how soon they started, this would have meant it was a fatal dose. Most experts think she couldn't have lived through that because normally if you're exposed to radiation, it actually takes a little while to show its effects. It's like not instant because you're only exposed to a little bit and you just sort of get some symptoms and life goes on. Like you say, you get better. But if it was the fact that she got it like that night, the next day, and how strong her symptoms were, that kind of dose that it would have taken to do that really should have killed her.
Or, and now this is what I actually think, it's a scam to get her medical bills paid because that is a lot of money in America.
But you would think that if they were taking them to court, they would expect to have to hand over their medical bills.
Well, yeah, but I'm not saying she hasn't she isn't ill as fuck and got all these symptoms. I'm saying that
You're sort of right in that she could have been ill and the doctors are saying, oh, yeah, like you've been exposed to radiation. And then she saw this as an opportunity to blame it on that.
Yeah, I don't think there was some big conspiracy. I think it's a scam. It went a bit wrong.
Many people have pointed out that her full medical records were never actually released, and what was released was like generally explained. There were doctors, like I say on the documentary, that went on record and said what was wrong with her, but no full record was released. Eventually, it was cancer that she died from, but she was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease that caused her hair to fall out. So it's like the little bits that we do know. But then don't you think it's odd, though, that Vickie and Colby got ill as well?
No, it could just be a coincidence.
Could it?
Yeah. She knows she got cancer, so she have exposed herself to radiation, but with them two involved, and them two have got a little dose of it, and I think it's a scam.
Some have questioned the health of Betty and Vickie, and possibly even Colby to an extent before the incident, because that doesn't really come up. And one guy even went as far as to put forward Munchausen's, or a version thereof.
Yeah, that's sort of in line with what I was saying, like self-inflicted.
Yeah, have they found a way?
Yeah, just getting near radiation.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, if this had worked, if the government had been like, yeah, okay. Although they would never have admitted something they didn't do. They have a hard time admitting things they did do.
No,
so
exactly.
How would they think this would ever work?
Just laziness, I think. I think like just hoping for that easy payout, make them go away.
Maybe they thought that a judge would believe it was the government, even though the government were denying it.
Exactly.
I wondered, no one else is really wondering this, but I wondered about, like, did it all start, like, they were coming back from dinner, so did they just get some, like, really bad food poisoning and then have this idea?
Or did they accidentally get magic mushrooms?
I don't think they fed the 7-year-old magic mushrooms.
Not on purpose. They just had, like, a communal trip.
You'd think if it was something at the restaurant, though, or something where they'd been that night, other people would have been involved.
Yeah, probably if it was environmental.
The asphalt thing comes up a lot, but do you reckon that's just a coincidence? Because I sort of do.
Yeah.
I don't know why I have such a hard time convincing myself of stories like this, considering if there was like a demon involved, I'd be like, yep, you need to give it a chance. So I don't know.
I don't think there's anything in this that you need to give a chance. I think it's all pretty explainable.
It is fairly well respected. Like I hadn't heard of it before. I came across it in a book, but
might be well respected. But
once I Googled it, I sort of found there's a lot of like documentaries and shows and stuff that have covered this. There are a lot of people actually from the area who commented on like topics on Reddit and YouTube and stuff like that, saying that they live there and that they actually see a lot of strange UFO encounters like this. But I wonder if that's a bit normal, because once you know that there's been a UFO in the area, does it not become a bit of a hot spot naturally because more people are going there to look for stuff?
More people are looking up, yeah. And more people are seeing things that aren't there. Shapes in the clouds that suddenly look like a UFO to them. Because that's what the brain does.
Well, some people consider that, going back to the government now, that it might have been a reverse engineered aircraft, like a project that went wrong. Some sort of like dark project that they didn't actually mean for it to get that far.
Oh yeah, if it was a government
that close
thing,
to the ground.
If it was a government thing, it was definitely some sort of dark project. Like it was definitely off the books.
Do you think it could have been like? Let's assume that what they saw was real, that they're telling the truth. Then what could it have been? Was it aliens and the government arrived to protect our airspace, or was it the government? Again, let's assume for a second that we believe the report from Vickie and Betty. What's the explanation based on that report?
It's way more likely to be government playing around with its new toy than it is to be aliens.
Wouldn't they play around with it like near a sea or something though? Like,
yeah, but
rather than mainland Texas?
Sometimes their toys like roll away from them.
I like the idea that they came to protect our airspace. And some people say as well that it might have been as nuclear-powered Soviet craft. but like you say, Cold War,
get those women.
I don't think, I don't think it was after the women specifically. I think they happened upon it more than, like, the craft was looking for them.
I still think that the most is more likely to be an American toy that's gone awry.
But ultimately, you don't believe the government were involved at all. You think they made the whole thing up for one reason or another.
Mainly because I think the government wouldn't, like you said, would be a bit more careful.
But you don't believe that all alien encounters are made up, do you?
No. But this one has got fuck all evidence. It's just took what two women said.
There is one thing that I couldn't find. I even went as far as to Google this.
There'd
this
be
link.
way more. Why? It'd be evidence. It'd be evidence heavy if that many helicopters flew over.
Yeah. There's one thing that came to mind when I heard this because of when it was. And that was near Christmas because it was 29th of December. And I Googled it in relation to another event that I had thought of because I thought other people must be making this connection. Other people must be talking about this. No one. I'm sure on the dark depths of the internet, someone is going to now tell me that actually, yeah, so-and-so is talking about this. And I'm sure there's other podcasts that I haven't listened to that are talking about this. But why is nobody linking these two events together? What else happened near Christmas? UFO-based, clearly. See, even you, and this is something that I know you actually have the feel that there's some credibility in, and even you're not making the link to it.
I just don't see it as necessary that we would put me on some sort of quiz show. Just fucking tell me what it is.
Rendlesham. That happened on the 26th, the 27th, and the 28th, and they saw this big fuck-off bright light that no one could explain, and that was in 1980. I was shook when I Googled the date of that because I knew it was I knew it was around Christmas in those days between Boxing Day and New Year's. But I thought, and I knew it was in the 80s, but I couldn't. I thought, it's going to be like a couple of years before or after. No, the same year. Who's to say? Given that as well, Rendlesham, it was an American force at that airbase, even though Rendlesham is in the UK. Rendlesham's in the UK. We've got a Rendlesham episode. If you want to understand that, please go back and listen. Rendlesham's in the UK, but it was an American Air Force that were there. Who's to say that the American Air Force didn't come and get this craft and, like, get it over to America?
Maybe. Or
that it was always aliens and they both saw it. It's a very, very similar story.
Or it was, like, multiple aliens coordinated.
Yes!
Or, it could have been Santa.
Okay. I feel like you're not making the same connection as me. Do you not think it's weird, though, that these happened at the same time?
No, I am making the same connection as you. Santa was maybe a little facetious.
Yeah, I know. The other thing, though, as well, is that in 1980, news did not travel as quickly. So it's not as if Betty and Vickie would have opened the newspaper and been like, there was a UFO in England yesterday. I know. Let's pretend we've seen one tonight. No, it didn't come out about Rendlesham for ages. And when it did, it, wasn't as obvious. Didn't know as much about it as we do now.
I'd be interested in how the actual time of that lines up.
Rendlesham, they reported seeing it on the 26th, the 27th, and the 28th. This was the 29th at 9:00 at night in Texas, who are behind us. So it had time to get there.
That's what I mean. Like, I'd like to see it on an actual timeline of what overlapped with what and when.
Okay, I'll see what I can find out. Maybe we'll add to this on like a YouTube short or something. But I can't believe that no one else is even so much as considering that.
Well, there is no other connection other than the date.
Yeah, but that's huge. Two significant events connected by date and the fact that it was the light. Because I remember from Rendlesham...
One is way more significant than the other. I will defend Rendlesham versus two old women.
Yes, but Rendlesham also, didn't want that to get out. They denied that at first.
Well, yeah, that's because they're the government. Not because they're Betty.
I don't know. The fact that it's like the bright light thing as well. And the shape of the craft. I mean, he said it was more triangular. They're saying diamond. I mean, that's a similar shape. It's not like one saying circle, one saying square.
No, one could have misseen.
Who's to
I'm
say
saying it's outside the realm
first.
of possibility.
I just think it's so weird that these two things happened. When I thought, it's Christmas, it's around the same time. I'll see if there's any connections to Rendlesham. And then when I found out it was the same year, I was like, look what I've created. Like, look what I've done. I've uncovered evidence.
Well, you've made a very loose connection.
I think I've made quite a powerful connection. And I think other people should look into this. I think we should go back to Rendlesham and then we should go to the place in Texas where this happened and we'll be the ones that put this together.
Well, we'll put it on Reddit though.
We've been to Rendlesham actually and it was kind of spooky, wasn't it? It was kind of like eerie almost, like to imagine like the people that had literally stood in the same place as us and what they had seen.
When you thought about it, it was kind of nuts.
I don't think it'd feel the same way on a fast road in Texas. kind of loses its edge a little bit. But yeah, I just think that's fascinating. I've made that connection, and I don't know. For me, that's huge. And
run with it. See what you can get out of it. Off you go.
Maybe I'll contact John and see if he wants to can make this connection, or Nick Pope, or both of them.
Maybe.
Okay, so I've made a connection, and I'm going to go off and do that. You can go back and listen to our Rendlesham episode, because I think that you'll make the same connections. But as for this one,
your answer better be, I believe this one to be true.
No, yeah, I do. I was going to say, as for this one,
because
I find it hard to move past the fact I don't think they were lying. A lot of people don't think they were lying. Even the government don't think they were lying, or claim they weren't lying. If the government were involved, I think it definitely was somehow related to what happened in Rendlesham. I do. So I absolutely wholeheartedly believe Betty and Vickie on this one. I didn't until I made that connection. I was a little bit kind of like, okay, well, can't really see what you got to gain from this, but are you wrong? Are you incorrect in the sense that, like, you know, is it something like some sort of version of Munchausen's? Are you just trying to get better from some illness you already had? Like, it might just be some terribly unfortunate mistake. And that may still be true, but I don't know. I think this incident and the Rendlesham incident, 100% connected. If you know why they're not being connected, please contact me. Send us a message.
I think slightly different to you. I think it's a load of bollocks.
I just can't believe you don't connect that to Rendlesham. It's so similar. Like, forget the old women. Imagine it. What if it was military men standing on that road and saying they saw it?
Rendlesham's a lot, and I can see some comparisons, but I don't think they're enough to validate what those women are saying. I think.
But if it was a military man standing on the side of the road saying he saw it in Texas, would that mean more to you?
No.
Okay, so it's the incident on the whole that you don't really believe, not the fact that it's coming from two old ladies.
It's the incident on the whole. I think it's bullshit.
Oh, that's a shame.
I think it's the old ladies trying to get some form of medical bill paid in some form of scam.
I can't believe you don't think this is the same UFO from Rendlesham.
No.
I'm shook. Okay, well, let us know what you think. Let us know if you think, first of all, what Betty and Vickie really saw, whether that was true, what they're trying to gain from it. But mostly, let me know if you think I'm right. And if you think this was similar to the Rendlesham episode. And I will also be writing about this in our blog, which you can find at mysteryoflifepodcast.co.uk. And you can follow us on Instagram at the Mystery of Life Pod. And we'll be back next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.